Guy finds cooler in river and instantly regrets opening it. But before we start, please take a moment to give this video a like, subscribe to Happy World, and hit the bell so you'll never miss these great stories. People all over the world enjoy spending their days off from work playing in the water or tanning on the beach. But what if your day on the beach turned into a day full of mystery and adventure? He pushed the container across the water. He was relieved it wasn't too heavy. This put his mind at ease about a potential body lying within. But his relief came too soon. He dragged the cooler onto the shore. People gathered round, anxious to see what was inside. As he peeled off the tape sealing it, his mind raced. Finally, as he opened the hatch, he looked inside. That discovery would haunt him forever. It's not uncommon for people to find objects floating in a body of water. Unfortunately, it's not truly a day at the beach without someone finding some fishing line or a plastic bag drifting along the shoreline. But that's not always the case. Sometimes people get more than they bargained for when they made the choice to spend the day by the water. What would you do if you found a large object floating towards you in the water? Would you heed the warning of horror movies and swim away as fast as possible? Or would your curiosity get the best of you, leading you to swim closer to investigate? It seems that most people choose to ignore the horror movies, and many of them end up regretting it. The river was a popular spot for the locals. Its peaceful banks drew people to them. But nobody knew how deeply they could draw a person in, until an unsuspecting man found a suspicious container. Floating lazily down the river, a man spotted the mysterious ice cooler. Curiosity got the better of the man as he fished it out of the water. Nobody knew what lay within, but when he opened it, he wished he hadn't. There are countless stories that start out this way. Stories that speak about human bodies making their way to the surface from the depths of the ocean. Finding a human body is one thing, but finding only one part of a human body is a completely different situation. Imagine being this fisherman who was only trying to catch some fish when he caught a leg instead. Two fishermen were enjoying their day out on the water when one of them got a bite on their line. Instantly filled with excitement, the man began to reel in the fish. It wouldn't be long before the men would realize that instead of pulling a fish out of the water, they were pulling out something that was desperately missed by the human who lost it. Mark Warner was canoeing when his prosthetic leg went into the water. Typically, you'd just pull the leg out of the water and go on with your day. But a beaver had a different plan. As soon as Mark attempted to get his leg out of the water, a beaver swam off with it. Luckily, Mark Warner didn't have to go without his leg for too long. Those fishermen were eventually able to pull the leg out of the water. Mark must have been extremely grateful to walk on two legs again, because he gave the men $50 reward for their trouble. Hopefully, that mysterious cooler came with a reward as well. This seemed like the stuff movies were made of. Mysterious cooler box floats downstream. The man used his phone's camera zoom to take a better look at the floating object. He assumed someone out on a picnic had lost their cooler in the river. His curiosity piqued and he decided to fish in the cooler box. He wanted to locate its owner, and to do this, he had to see what the cooler had inside. What a nice guy. He didn't care if the cooler was filled with treasure, he just wanted to get it back to where it belonged. But first, he'd have to see if the cooler belonged to anyone else. It sounds just like the story of Adam Hastings. Adam decided to try his luck at magnet fishing, so he headed to the lake in Pittville Park, Cheltenham, UK. Adam assumed that he wasn't going to find anything on his first time trying to magnet fish, but boy was he wrong. After a few times, Adam began to feel like magnet fishing wasn't for him. Just when he was about to quit, the magnet located something, and what came out of that water would soon shock everyone. As Adam pulled the line out of the water, he realized he was pulling on a small safe. Adam opened the safe when he got onto the dock. Once people had heard about what Adam found, they wouldn't stop talking about it for years. Inside the safe, which was most likely stolen in a robbery, were a few watches, war medals, and some jewelry. Unfortunately, a lot of the treasure was ruined by being in the water for so long, but at least the owners were able to get their belongings back. Would the cooler be filled with treasure like Adam's safe, or would there be something more sinister inside? The cameraman started asking the people around him if the cooler belonged to them. None of them recognized it, and most of them hadn't even noticed there was something floating in the water. He approached a pair of young men who appeared to have gone to the river to swim along with their dog. The cooler didn't belong to them either, but they were just as curious about this mysterious object as the cameraman. "What if it's treasure?" asked the cameraman. The question made the other guys start to wonder what they'd like to find. The group of men started discussing whether someone should swim across the river to retrieve the cooler. If he had swimming shorts, the cameraman said, he'd do it himself. "I vote this guy," he said, pointing at a man with blue swim trunks. The young man had no choice but to acquiesce. Imagine finding a cooler full of treasure. What would you do with it? Would you turn it into the authorities? Spend all of it on clothes, houses, or cars? Or would you turn it into a natural history museum? The possibilities of what you can find in the water are endless. For example, the little girl who was helping her father with the family boat and stumbled across a priceless artifact. 8-year-old Saga Venetchik of Copenhagen, Denmark, was helping her dad with his boat when she stepped on what she thought was a stick. When the little girl bent down, she noticed that it wasn't a stick at all. It was actually a 1,500-year-old 34-inch sword. Archaeologists aren't sure what the sword was doing in the water, but they're dying to figure it out. Just like the men with the mysterious cooler. As the guy in the blue trunks prepared to get in the water, the cameraman skipped a stone across the river, perhaps to gauge the distance. Then he encouraged the other man not to rush, saying, "I don't think it's moving for a while." Finally, the guy in the blue trunks waded hip-deep into the water, then started to swim. His dog followed, and before anyone knew it, he'd reached the cooler on the other side. Expectations began to mount. It's exciting to find cool seashells in the water, let alone a strange cooler. These men must have been full of adrenaline when they started going into the water. The possibilities of what could fit into a cooler as large as this one are infinite, and these men were about to receive a surprise that they could remember for the rest of their lives. "Float it over," yelled the cameraman when he saw the guy had made it to the cooler. Everyone watched in anticipation as the man swam back to their side of the river, pushing the floating container in front of him. "It's like Christmas," someone said, clearly excited. The man didn't seem to be having much trouble, which probably meant whatever was inside wasn't too heavy. Finally, he, his dog, and the cooler made it to shore. As he pushed it onto land, people noticed something odd. Usually, when you find a cooler in the water, you just assume that someone lost their picnic lunch when they were enjoying their day at the beach. You figure that once you open it, you'll find lunch foods and drinks, and then you'll try to find the owner. Unfortunately, this cooler was nothing like a cooler filled with food. Aside from the lid, the cooler had been sealed with 4 strips of duct tape, which made it seem as if someone knew it would end up in the river. The cameraman appeared to recognize the brand or model because he asked, "Has it got one of those hatches?" He walked over to the man and waited impatiently as the duct tape was peeled off the cooler. But neither he nor the man in the blue trunks was expecting what they were about to find. You see, this cooler is unbelievably creepy. Who wraps a cooler in large strips of duct tape anyway? We'll tell you who. Someone is trying to hide something or get rid of something. Something like the Dybbuk box. This box has been given away, hidden, and buried, but still manages to find a new home every time. The Dybbuk box is said to be possessed, and anyone who has had possession of the box has suffered through some sort of paranormal experience in their home, including nightmares, mysterious bruises, insomnia, and strange smells. Could this cooler be like the Dybbuk box? Was someone trying to get rid of the cooler because they believed it was possessed by a paranormal being? These men were about to find out. After removing the duct tape, the man in the blue trunks opened the hatch and took a peek inside the cooler. But as soon as he saw what was within, he immediately jumped back. Startled, "What the F?" he cursed. He looked up and stared right at the camera, an expression of fear and disbelief in his face. What was in that cooler that unsettled him so? What could have been in the box that made the man jump back like that? Was it a body? A mutilated hand? What would you do if you found an actual body part hidden in something you pulled out of the water? It was the year 1935 when 2 fishermen were struggling to get a tiger shark off their line. They tried to kill the shark, but it refused to die. Soon after, the shark was brought to an aquarium to be treated for its injuries. While the shark was in captivity, it began to act strangely. All of a sudden, the shark threw up a human arm. People couldn't believe what they'd witnessed. But everyone was curious to find out how the shark had gotten the arm in the first place. Did it kill a swimmer? Did the shark find the arm and decided that it was time for lunch? After a bit of investigating, detectives were able to identify the arm thanks to a unique tattoo that was on it. The tattoo and the arm belonged to a boxer that had made a career out of committing petty crimes and owing people money. Apparently, he had irritated the wrong people and ended up at the bottom of the ocean, swimming with the fishes. Guess you shouldn't borrow money from loan sharks. Was this cooler evidence of an unsolved murder? Did these men just crack a huge case, or was there something a bit more strange in the cooler? Unfazed by the reaction of the first man, the cameraman decided to take a look inside the cooler. And that's when he saw what lay within. His brain couldn't process the tiny limbs he saw inside. Shocked, he also jumped back and cursed. But something in his brain told him that it couldn't be right. So he approached the cooler again. As he opened the hatch, he took a better look and then began laughing deliriously. Luckily, it wasn't a child stuffed inside the box, but what could it be? Who would take the time to not only shove something inside of a sealed cooler, but send it up the river as well? Sounds like someone who needed to get as far away from it as possible, and they didn't want to be seen doing it. Inside the cooler lay an eerie baby doll. The two men still couldn't believe what they were seeing. They stood like two statues, nervously laughing. Then their friends approached. Everyone had the same reaction upon seeing the doll, a mix of amusement and apprehension. "There's a body in there," joked one of the guys. But even between laughs, they couldn't hide their nervousness, because with the doll came an ominous message written in the cooler. These guys treated the whole thing like it was a joke, but was it? Like we said before, only people who are scared or doing something wrong put things, like dolls, inside of a sealed cooler. What happened with this doll that caused someone to get rid of it in such a way? Were they punishing their child by taking their doll away? Or were they trying to accomplish something a lot more important, like saving their own life? "I'm like shaking," said the cameraman. However, not all the guys were as creeped out. They couldn't understand why someone would hide something as innocent as a doll. "Wait, maybe there's cocaine in there," ventured one of them. Nervously, the men inspected the doll closely, but no substances were found in the body. The men continued the search but found nothing solid. However, someone noticed something scrawled down the side of the icebox. It's not really surprising that the man thought the doll might be carrying illegal substances inside of it. Drug pushers have tried getting away with smuggling drugs across the border in extremely creative ways. You won't believe some of the ways they've tried to get drugs into the country, such as the woman with a burrito. Customs agents arrested one woman for trying to cross the border with a burrito shell chock full of illegal substance. Such a waste of a perfectly delicious tortilla. Sounds just like the men who tried to smuggle large amounts of illegal substances over the border hidden in coconuts. Fortunately, this doll wasn't stuffed with drugs, even though that would make more sense than it was actually going on. These men were about to be given the shock of a lifetime. A young woman approached, wanting to see what all the fuss was about. The cameraman quickly closed the latch on the cooler and told her, "You gotta open it for yourself," clearly in an attempt to startle her as they had been startled. His stunt worked. The woman jumped back and cursed just like all the guys had done before her. "Who does that?" she exclaimed, puzzled. Only a truly disturbed person would come up with that. The men may have tried to scare this woman, but the doll in the cooler did a good enough job creeping everyone out all by itself. Would they ever figure out where this doll came from, or would it remain a mystery forever? "I guess somebody gets a free cooler out of it," quipped the cameraman. More people approached to take a look at the cooler and its contents. "Dibs on the doll," he later said. The video was later uploaded by Mr. Technical Difficult, a popular YouTube channel. It soon went viral, racking up millions of views and thousands of comments. The commenters ranged from skeptical to amused to utterly terrified. Most people know better than to touch a mysterious doll. Which brings us back to the point of listening to the warning of certain horror movies. Haven't you ever heard of Annabelle? Annabelle's a movie that's based on a true story about a doll that had an evil spirit attached to it. While most of the movie is purely fictional, there was indeed a doll named Annabelle that paranormal experts claimed to be possessed. Whether or not that's true, it's best to leave alone any doll in a taped cooler floating down the river. And it would seem that a lot of people on the internet would agree with that sentiment. "Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me," wrote one user by the name of Skylock. It was one of many other commenters who believed that there was something sinister about the doll and that it should just be left alone. Meanwhile, others suggested that the whole thing was a prank created by the cameraman himself. He just put a doll in a cooler, then taped it, and then finally he put it out in the river and started recording. Said user, try me. What do you believe? It seems like we have another unsolved mystery on our hands. What are your detective skills telling you about this case? Was the man actually pulling a prank on everyone? Or was this doll someone's Annabelle? Most likely we'll never know why someone put that doll in the cooler. But we have learned one thing from all this. Leave creepy things right where you find them, and don't invite the paranormal world into your home. Follow these tips and the sun will continue to shine in your life.